It all started with a broken laptop. It happens to a lot of people, but the fact that it happened to me on that very day, at that very time, seemed like God had given me the finger. I was 45 minutes away from holding my first ever public speech at a shareholder meeting, and all my notes were gone. The slideshow was uploaded and ready, but my speaking points had gone the way of Jimmy Hoffa. The IT guy, Armand, was frantically trying to work his magic, but it was going to be down to the wire. He had to stop to wipe his hands with wet wipes every few minutes or so, costing me precious seconds. I had cold sweats seeping through my corporate pantsuit, and I reminded myself to keep my arms down so they couldn't see my sweat marks. My hair was already a mess, with long brown strands sticking to my cheek no matter how straight I held my neck. "I'm sorry," said Armand. "The problem is the hard drive. Everything else works fine. I can put in a new one and get it to boot, but your files are gone." He threw his hands up in surrender, and I almost cried. I didn't want to do this damn presentation to begin with. "Good luck. I'll keep my eye out for a better one." I stepped out on stage with little to no prep to a crowd of 460 of our most influential and prosperous investors. Everyone in that crowd could hire or fire 10 of me without batting an eye, but I was greeted with a courteous applause and tired smiles, all veiled behind a blinding spotlight. The headset chafed against my ears. Finally, the slides came on and I just winged it. It was awkward, earnest, and burned a hole straight through my stomach. I tasted stomach acid for the rest of the day. The moment I finished, I dashed off stage and locked myself in the bathroom for a solid 20 minutes. I could hear people coming to check on me, but Armand was quick to redirect them to get me some space. It was done, but I felt awful. And on top of all of that, I was still expected to appear for the afterwork. Drinks and smiles like I was supposed to pretend these people didn't practically own me. But it is what it is. I put on the dress and the earrings and suffered in silence. I was never good with people. I was a sick kid who mostly played with words. My mom came from this small hippie compound in rural Minnesota, so she was used to having a small group to spend her time with. She didn't exactly encourage me to explore the wide world. I didn't just hear about stranger danger. I heard about razor blades and Halloween candy, rat poison sprinkled on wild raspberries, brain parasites and unfiltered rainwater, and that eating sunflower seeds would make you mentally ill, especially the blue ones. So, yeah, not really a people person. I still have this reaction to step back when someone approaches me. It's imprinted in me like the steps to a dance, and my mom's ever-present worry solidified as this nagging voice in the back of my head, ready to bring me down whenever I thought I was too special. After the presentation and the subsequent afterwork, I was exhausted. I collapsed in my hotel room and slipped into a dreamless sleep. I prayed it had passed quickly, so I could get to my car and just go home. I lay there with my eyes closed and waited for the anxious voice to quiet down. You know, the one that keeps telling you how much you've done wrong. That voice. "James in accounting got 3 business cards. Lauren got 2. Why didn't you get any?" They were slow on clapping. "You messed up the ending. They will remember the fit of that dress more than anything. It was too tight." The next day I packed, skipped breakfast, and threw myself in the shower. I wasn't wasting another second if I didn't have to, and I had a 7-hour drive to go. I didn't dare use the hotel shampoo or I might end up with a skin condition, so I always brought my own. As I rinsed off, I felt this electric pain shooting up my shoulder blade. I couldn't raise my arm without something snagging the muscle. My pulse shot up, making me think I was having some kind of episode, but it slowed as I mentally checked myself. I could see, taste, and hear just fine. Not even a tingle in my fingertips. There was just this unusual pain. I reached back and could feel a warmth with my fingers. It was just out of reach, so I stepped in front of the mirror. At just the right angle, I could see an inflamed patch of skin on the back of my left shoulder blade. There was a bulge to it, and I could see little strands of red reach out the sides. I'd had stress reactions before, especially as a kid, but this was something new. And then again, I'd never been as stressed as I'd been the previous day. If I had to pick between a bruise on my shoulder and hundreds of judgmental people, I'll pick the bruise all day, every day. I figured I'd get it checked out if it wasn't gone in a day or two. I must have slept weird. And yet that anxious voice in my mind couldn't help but add 2 cents. Maybe they saw it. Maybe they were disgusted. Maybe they think you're sick, contagious. Maybe that's why you didn't get any business cards. Gross. I slipped out just before 8 a.m. My phone kept beeping with corporate updates. Someone thanking us for attending. HR reminding us to send in travel and gas receipts. Reminders to check the weekly newsletter. Armand telling me he'd have a better laptop ready for me Monday morning. I turned it all off. It wasn't until I was back on the road that I could finally relax. I could listen to what I wanted, at whatever volume I wanted. I could control my space. That was okay. I'd finished this despite dreading it for months. There'd be no mandatory corporate outings for months, and next time someone else would have to hold the presentation. But over the next couple of hours, that spot on my shoulder blade would make itself known. Whenever I took an awkward left turn or stretched a little too long, that ache would shoot through my arm like I'd touched a candle, and with it my worries would flare up. It wasn't good enough. They're gonna get rid of you. You should have stayed for breakfast. Now they know there's something wrong with you. But I made it home. I settled into my space, made some time for friends and family, and healed. Monday was just around the corner. The following work week wasn't that unusual. 2 meetings, lunchroom talk, customer satisfaction surveys, and being told to smile despite nothing ever being good enough. Thinly veiled beneath corpo speak of room for improvement, striving for perfection, and being oriented for change. It's like being home for Christmas. All through that week, that spot on my shoulder blade got worse. It had started with a mild swelling like a bug bite, a warm little spot no bigger than a fingernail. Now it had grown to the size of a thumb, and I could feel it throbbing. I started sleeping on my other side. I'd made an appointment with the company doctor, but as it wasn't an emergency, it'd be scheduled a week from now. By the time I finally got to see a physician, the growth was the size of half a golf ball. It was protruding from the skin like a hard mass. I was brought in for some tests, blood work mostly, a couple of questionnaires about recent events. They checked my throat, did some mobility testing, and poked a couple of nerves. As we wrapped up, I was brought into a small office with an older woman in a white coat. I'd never seen her before, but I figured she was a company affiliate. This was all paid for by our insurance premium. It says in your chart you have a family history in St. Gall. Can you fill me in on that? Is that relevant? It could be. There are a couple environmental factors that we need to exclude, mostly allergens. My mom's from St. Gall. I only lived there for a couple of years before we moved to Minneapolis. I see. Then I think we have our answer. She called it polygenic helianthic encapsulation, a stress reaction that can flare up in individuals with a certain combination of genes. It mostly happened to rural folks living near the Rockies, but there were a couple of people in rural Minnesota that also carried the gene. It was unusual, and even more unusual for it to flare up like mine had. The reaction was carried by a stress trigger. It's going to come down on its own, she said. We'll get you some cortisol cream and you promise not to poke and prod it. The ache will come and go, but the swelling should subside within a couple of weeks. And if it doesn't? Well, then we have to take another look. I was sent home with what was, in effect, a doctor's note for people to be extra nice to me at the office. Since the PHE was a result of stress, there was talk of prescribing me beta blockers, but I didn't want to rely too heavily on medication if I didn't have to. It felt nice to have the option, though. I tried to keep going as normal. I could feel a little chafing here and there when I leaned back too far in my seat or when absent-mindedly reaching for a cup of coffee. It was always at the most inopportune times, and whenever I felt a sting of pain, I'd look up to see the worried faces turning my way. Armand had set me up with a new laptop, and got most of the company software on it so I could work from home for a couple of days if necessary. I could have kissed him. It was exactly what I needed. After a nerve-wracking discussion with my superior, I was given the green light to take some time away from the office. Of course, he wasn't happy with it. "He's already looking for a replacement," whispered the voice in the back of my head. "You're being a nuisance. That laptop is full of spyware." It was nonsense, but it was nonsense that wouldn't go away. So I began working from home. I carved out a home office space in my bedroom and made a colored chart to help me organize myself hour by hour. Simple but essential stuff. I could almost stomach the constant meetings and endless torrent of emails now, knowing I was in a safe space of my own. But even so, at the end of the day, that growth kept getting worse. It ached a bit more, and I could feel it all the way into my biceps. There was even the shadow of an ache when I turned my wrist a bit too far. But as the doctor had said, it would get a little worse before it got better. I just had to be patient. I decided to take a sick day. I took care of my plants, watched some episodes of a show I'd been putting off, and took a long walk, ending the day with a chicken wrap from a place down on the street corner. Not a care in the world, for a little while. And yet the growth got bigger. I tried booking a new appointment, but the doctor said we had to wait for the encapsulation to reach the peak. There was little they could do without intervening surgery, and that would most likely cost me some mobility in my arm. It was an option, but we weren't there yet. We booked another checkup a week down the line, hoping things had leveled out a bit by then. I noticed how the growth seemed to increase at random. Some days I'd feel like crap and it wouldn't move an inch. Other days I could be doing perfectly fine and it grew by a full inch. I started using a marker to track the growth, but it was difficult to see in the bathroom mirror. But there had to be some kind of trigger. It wasn't just stress. That much was clear. There was something else causing it to grow. I began doing regular checks during the day. Turns out, it didn't grow steadily all the time. It happened in bursts. And it didn't just happen when I was stressed either. I could be perfectly fine and still have it grow. At first, I thought it had something to do with my eating habits or dehydration, but that wasn't it either. It didn't correlate to lunch hours or whenever I had a cup of coffee. It didn't correlate with my stress either. The only common denominator was our meetings. It always grew whenever I was in a video call. But that wasn't the only time it grew. It almost always grew whenever I went outside, and sometimes when I just went into the kitchen for a refill. I made a long list of actions and possible exposure I could have experienced in those times of the day, turning a fresh page on my colored hour chart. It wasn't sunshine, humidity, bad or good weather. It wasn't being inside or outside. The only thing it seemed to react to was other people. I experimented with this a little more. It wasn't entirely consistent. I could chat with people just fine or answer emails. I could also take phone calls. But as soon as I got onto a video call, or talked to a real person, it grew. So it wasn't just being near other people. It was about being seen. I've heard about things reacting to being observed, how it changes things, but this was on a completely different level. I figured the growth had to be some kind of built-up of my disastrous presentation, and that it siphoned off a kind of hormone. Maybe something in my system got clogged from the massive stress. I figured I'd present my theory to the doctor at our next meeting. The second time I got to talk to that elderly woman in the white coat, I told her all about my theory. I showed her my schedule, my measurements, and explained why I thought this was the answer. She humored me, but didn't seem all that engaged. After all, there were a few points of data I'd excluded. "It's interesting, but then why does it still grow during these periods?" she said. She pointed to one of my charts. The growth still increased in size when I slept, and sometimes when I was just watching TV before going to bed. It would also increase at seemingly random times throughout the day. "You need to account for that too, and I think there's a variable we're not seeing." But can't we test this? Isn't there something we can do? We can, but it'll be gone long before we get a conclusive answer. The growth was the size of half a cantaloupe by then. It would radiate this intense heat throughout my entire back. I could feel my pulse through my skin. I had to compensate the weight by leaning to the right, giving me a lopsided walk, which just made things worse. I could swear I felt it growing when people looked at me, and the more it grew, the stranger I looked. It was this weird, never-ending cycle. The doctor had it x-rayed. I managed to sneak a peek of her discussing the growth with a colleague. I saw the image briefly before they took it off the wall, but from what I could see, it wasn't just empty. It looked like a sprawling web of nerves. It wasn't just a ball of pus. You couldn't poke a hole in it. It was a collection of little things all combined into one. They didn't discuss their findings with me, and I wasn't allowed to see the results of the scan. But they still insisted that things were going to work out just fine. I needed to be calm, confident, and patient. But they ended the meeting by giving me an emergency number. If the growth would burst or I suddenly felt very ill, I was to call that number. Not the emergency services, the elderly doctor clarified. You called this number. Leaving the hospital with that number in hand, the voice in the back of my head was clearer than ever. They're not telling you everything. They want something for themselves. You can't trust them. I was told to take some time off work. Not just a day, but substantial time. It was even recommended by the company doctor, so my boss had no choice but to comply. We started with 2 weeks, then we would reevaluate. It didn't matter what the doctor said about triggers, though, or about potential exposure. The growth kept growing no matter what I did. Some of it must have been correlated with being seen. It had to. I decided to put it to a practical test. I watched the growth in the bathroom mirror and drew the edges of it with a marker. That way I could see how much it had grown after what I was about to do. I went down to the chicken wrap place in the corner during lunch hour. There was a line reaching all the way out the door. I'd covered up my growth with a hoodie, but it was getting harder to hide it. At the very least, you could see something was off just with the way I leaned. I got to the counter, ordered an iced coffee and a wrap, paid and turned to leave. As I did, I willingly hit my foot on the side of an empty table. I fell forward, spilling lettuce, chicken, and iced coffee all over the floor. It looked a bit more dramatic than I'd anticipated, but it certainly caused a scene. Dozens of people stared me down. But what I noticed the most wasn't their stares. It was the voice in the back of my head. It was fuming, growing louder. They'll never look at you the same way. They'll sigh every time you come back here. They'll recognize you. They'll loathe you. I looked up to see the concerned faces. One of the baristas rounded the corner to help me up. You're pathetic, bothering others just to sate your curiosity. Despite the harsh thoughts, a hand reached out to me and I got up. They got me a new wrap and I was on my way back home away from prying eyes. I wouldn't eat that. You have no idea what they've done to it. And with that, it went in the trash. The growth was bigger, that much was for certain, but it didn't grow as fast as it did seemingly at random times of the day. About 1/4 of an inch in total. It was something, but it wasn't as explosive as I'd suspected. You made a fool of yourself for nothing, the voice reminded me. But I didn't know what to do. I wanted to make sense of things, and I wanted to be okay. There had to be some reason why I was feeling the way I did. There had to be a reason why I was weighed down by this thing, growing by the day. What was the end point? The only thing my stunt accomplished was making my doubts louder. I'd always been careful about making assumptions, and this was feeding into that uncertainty. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, getting ready for sleep. It was getting to me. It's still growing, the voice in my head reminded me. I know, I said out loud. It was the first time I spoke to it out loud, but it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't even question it. Are you ready to listen? I always listen, whether I like it or not. Dangling your feet, talking to yourself? What would they think? I don't care. Yes, you do. And it was right. I cared. I just wanted to blend in. I didn't want any more stares. I kept having this dream of being put in a cage, naked, far up in the air. I couldn't cover myself. No matter how I twisted and turned, someone would find an angle. In that dream, there were growths all over me. Some big, some small, all painful. The people down below would point as my cage dangled in the wind. They'd laugh at how I jiggled and squirmed. I had that dream every night for a full week. I'd wake up feeling exposed to the point where I didn't dare to shower in case I'd catch a glimpse of myself in the bathroom mirror. I couldn't bring myself to do it. I told the doctor I didn't care if my nerves got damaged. I had to get the growth out. But even so, they had to schedule me for a final consultation, and the only available time was 2 weeks later. I pulled down all the curtains. I ordered home food. I ate microwaved food in the dark, afraid that the light of my computer screen might cast a reflection I couldn't stomach. I tried reminding myself it would be okay eventually, but it was getting harder and harder to convince myself. Until one night, I sat on the edge of my bed, dangling my legs. The growth was the size of a head. I had to start sleeping on my stomach. It was big enough that it took some time for my heartbeat to reach all the way through it, making this double pulse through my body. Once when it reached the growth, another when it left. Despite all my efforts, it kept growing. I can make sense of it, but you will never listen. I'm tired. I can help you. Whatever. I fell face first into my pillow, letting it drink my sweat. I had to pull my covers up a little extra to account for the growth, making a tent-like shape on my back. I closed my eyes. You should move your computer out of your bedroom. What? I told you it was full of spyware. You didn't listen. I opened my eyes. It was plausible. I'd moved my computer into my bedroom the moment I started working from home. That's stupid. Then test it. You're good at testing. I made one final effort. I drew the edges of the growth with a marker. I covered up my computer and my phone with blankets and moved them into the kitchen. Then I went to sleep. The next day, the growth was the same size. For the first time, it hadn't expanded overnight. You're right, I mumbled into the bathroom mirror. This is it. I told you. You never listened to me. Let's try that then. Let's try to listen. I could feel my anxiety easing, my feet growing lighter, a soft breeze cooling the sweat on my back. We were in agreement. I was going to listen. I turned off all electronics. I kept the curtains down. I measured, and the growth didn't expand in the slightest. I could confirm that it did seemingly grow whenever I was seen. It fed on being seen. But it also exposed that I was being seen even when I didn't know it. Armand must have put something in there. He must have had a remote connection to the laptop camera. The moment I began working from home, he'd taken advantage of it. But I couldn't just confront him with it either. He could remove all traces of it. A growth on my back was hardly evidence. We'll expose him ourselves. You have all the access you need. They can see I've been there. Only if they have a reason to look. So, one day after the office closed, I dressed up in a big hoodie and made my way there. I had to drive carefully since I could hardly use my left arm anymore. Walking was a chore, and running was out of the picture. I dug my old phone out of my closet so I could use it to take pictures without risking someone watching me. The voice had said it was fine, and I trusted it well enough. I took some time avoiding large streets and made my way to the office. I parked at the end of the lot and gave some of the late stragglers a wide berth as to not recognize me from a distance. I scanned my car to the front door and took a left turn down the steps to the basement. A dark corridor lit up, blending the small green and red diodes from the server hall with a neutral fluorescent light. I don't know what to look for. I don't know this stuff. Sure you do. You've worked with these people for years. I looked around. There were 2 small offices, one for Armand and one for our junior technician. Both were empty and locked. I placed my hand on Armand's door and jiggled it a little. There was a rattle. I'd always thought that the bathroom doors on the 3rd floor, where I usually worked, were too flimsy. These were the same kind of doors. I knew exactly how to bypass that lock. It was just a matter of lifting the door a little and tapping the handle to my left. I did, and it worked. Told you. You got this. A pulse shot through my shoulder, forcing me to stop. I had to take a deep breath. The sudden ache caught me breathless like a punch to the gut. I wasn't okay. Maybe I was delusional. The growth was pulsating, moving, but I had to push through. I couldn't quit now. Armand had his work computer set up and ready. He usually left it on so he didn't have to start it up in the morning. Besides, there were probably diagnostic tools and backups running. But the screen was locked and I wasn't getting through anytime soon. The trail ended there. I need a password. It's not going to be written down. They don't do that. Maybe it's your name. I tried and failed. That wasn't it. It couldn't be. There was no way he was that obsessed. Even if he was, it'd just be dumb. Maybe it's your last name, but with zeros instead of O's. But of course, that wasn't it either. I checked the room. There were cables running in the corners, all labeled and secured, but a couple of labels were a bit strange. For example, one named Off-Site Strain Buffer. It was an audio-video feed, but unrelated to the surveillance footage from the building. I went back out into the hall outside of Armand's office and felt that ache again. It got worse. My vision blurred and I could feel a veil clouding my mind. I tried to shake it off, but it was getting to me. Push a little further. You're on the right track. This was a stupid idea. You're throwing me the damn wolves. I'm helping you. You just don't want to be helped. I opened the door to the server room with the same lift and jiggle as before. The lights were off. Powerful fans kept the room cool, leaving the dazzling red and green from the various machines to twinkle like distant stars. My head felt heavy. The growth was swelling. I reached for my old phone and tried to think of the emergency number the doctor had given me, just in case. But with my old phone in hand, I tripped. I fell flat on my stomach, smacking my head into the cold ceramic tiles. The growth was large enough that I could see it lying down. I couldn't get up, and that double pulse I'd been feeling was clearer. It wasn't just a delay, it was a completely different beat. It had a heartbeat, and it was different from mine. I mumbled to myself, feeling my body grow warm and dull. I wasn't tired, but I couldn't stay awake. Consciousness was slipping. Not now, not now, I mumbled. I blinked, trying to keep my focus. Then the growth moved. I held my breath, listening to the whir of machines. Then it happened, all without a sound. Black spikes pierced my hoodie, bursting through my skin. Not an explosion, but a hatching. There was no blood. Something sticky running down the sleeve of my arm. Something moving, getting tangled in the fabric. At the moment my nerves realized what was happening, my mind escaped to that space beyond sleep. Lights out. When I woke up, I was propped against one of the server cabins. Armand was there, looking down at me. He'd been running. Maybe he spotted me on the surveillance cameras. Maybe he had an extra in his office. What the fuck happened to you? There was no voice in my head to tell me what to say anymore. No guidance, no counsel, not even a scolding. It was quiet. I could feel my exposed shoulder, The fluids on my back had cooled, giving me a feverish shiver. I figured you out. I know what you're doing. You're insane. I'll call someone. He picked up his phone and started to dial the number. There was a glimpse of doubt in me. Maybe this had all just been a lie. After all, a lie after lie. A way for whatever had been clinging to me to justify its existence. Or maybe it wasn't. I looked up at Armand and cleared my throat. Off-site stream buffer. He paused. He turned to me and shook his head, fumbling for the right words. When he couldn't find them, he shrugged. I should have picked someone less fucking paranoid. I tried to get up, but my muscles backfired. My nerves were trying to make sense of what had happened, and I'd lost most, if not all, sensation in my left arm and legs. Even my neck kept swiveling like I'd been on a bender. I suppose you have to go away. Sorry about that. He fetched a couple of cables from one of the supply closets and bent down. He tied up my legs. I could see it, but I couldn't feel a thing. I tried to move, but all I did was topple over. You're not very good at this. Not much of a fighter. You don't know shit about me. Oh, I know more than you think. And so does about 5,000 anonymous donors. You're kind of fun, you know. The words echoed in my mind, reverberating in a cold sweat. 5,000? Was that a real number? All these people watching me. What had they seen? They probably had my name and address. I couldn't think straight, and for once there was no voice in the back of my mind to make things worse. I didn't spiral. Not this time, but it was too late. It made sense. This was what made it grow at random times, someone tuning in to watch. Armand tied up my legs and wrists. He tried to move me, but when he put his hand on my shoulder, he had to step back. Something stuck to the palm of his hand. What the fuck are you, half snail? He fumbled through his pocket, looking for a wet wipe and some hand sanitizer. He had some trouble using it single-handedly and made this awkward little dance trying to figure out how to hold it all with his elbow. But it was finally sinking in. This goofy, harmless-looking nobody was going to make me disappear. He'd probably strangle me to death with a cable and drop me off the side of the highway or bury me in a shallow grave. The fighting was over before it begun. I'd lost the moment I walked down those stairs. I'd always figured death would come from somewhere stupid, somewhere I could have avoided. I'd been afraid of everything from wasps to almost expired cheese, and what would get me killed turned out to be the one time I acted with confidence. That's all it took. One step in the wrong direction. I couldn't accept this. My heart raced, but no matter how I twisted and turned, all the strength in me had died. I was exposed and vulnerable. At any other time and day, I would have stood a chance, but now I was a sitting duck. Armand wiped his hands and threw away the wet wipe. I thought his face would look different the moment he decided he was going to murder me, but it looked the same as always when he turned to me. Maybe he always knew he wanted to do this. Something plopped down on the floor, something dark, not much larger than a finger. Armand stepped on it and almost slipped. Disgusting! What did you? Another plopped down, and another. Looking up, the ceiling was covered in them. Little dark things sticking to the ceiling. I told you. He wants to hurt you. Wants to kill you. Another chimed in. Wants to make you a plaything. His plaything. Everyone's plaything. He thinks he's clever. His mother said he was clever. Something added in with a laugh. He sleeps alone and it hurts him. It hurts him so much. Armand turned left and right, looking around. His eyes were going wild. I realized that he was hearing it too. That voice inside my head had burst out, and it was crawling across the ceiling. My anxiety, my pain, every intrusive thought I'd had given flesh and intent. and as they fell from the ceiling, he could only brush off so many before they were on him. I could see them moving and squirming to get under his clothes. Some of them had spikes in the front. Others had spikes along the ridges of a circling spine. They weren't exactly snakes or worms. They were more like long sea urchins. They had this musculature where they could move their skin one way and their bones another. There must have been 100 of them crawling all over, piercing his skin and pinching his nerves. He made it all the way out the door, then collapsed in the hallway outside. Armand didn't scream. It was more of a painful mewling, a sad groan growing longer and quieter. He crawled pretty far, but it didn't stop them. I could hear every spike puncturing the skin like stabbing an orange with a sharp pencil. And after a while, it was quiet, but for the hum of the servers. A dark mass gathered in front of me. Little dark things crawling on top of one another, arranging themselves into a colony, like the one that had lived in me. The doctors must have known. I can't hear you anymore. It's quiet. Dozens of voices, all using slight variations in different words, all amounting to the same thing. I was a good listener. Is it over? Are you going away? And this time the answer was unequivocal. Yes. I closed my eyes, hoping my body would find the strength to recover. I could feel the careful wriggle of 100 little things curling up against the edge of me like a cat settling into its owner's lap. A part of me knew they'd be gone by morning. And they were. It was the junior technician that had found us. I had no idea what he must have thought, but he called security. From there it escalated. The authorities deemed it self-defense. A puncture wound from a pen straight to Armand's neck. Of course, they knew it was hundreds, if not thousands, of wounds, but somehow the report looked different from reality. It didn't even mention how I couldn't have done it, as I was tied up the moment he died. There were also cameras who had conveniently stopped working. I was asked surprisingly few questions, and most of them were leading. The officer in charge more or less spelled it out for me. And that's when he attacked you, right? And then you picked up this pen, right? And you had no choice but to fight back, right? They made the story for me. I didn't have to say much. Just nod and sign the paper. The final checkup with the doctor was quick. The skin on my back was intact, but there was only the outline of a sack from where the growth had been. They cut the excess skin off, and I didn't feel a thing. I was perfectly normal from that point on, at least physically. I wanted to tell them about the mass and the many dark things, but it was implied that they already knew. Perhaps it would have been worse to stop it. Maybe our medical professionals know something we don't. Before we went our separate ways, I decided to ask, "What did you do with them?" And the old doctor looked at me. "We put them back in the ocean. That's where they come from." I suppose bad things happen to people all the time, but we all react differently. I think I will always be the kind of person to assume the worst and take measures to avoid it, no matter if a voice tells me to or not. It's just the way I was built. But as I once heard, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not watching. Hey everybody, Kevin here from Nightmares Nightly. So this was a story by the great Saturday, who is one of the most prolific posters on No Sleep with a story every single week. This one, I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit of a letdown for me. I still enjoyed it, but I mean, y'all, come on, it didn't really make much sense at the end, did it? I mean, she works at a company, and there were some things in the middle that bugged me a bit, like, okay, the main character is an idiot. All right, let's just say that. She's a total moron. You're telling me you go to the doctors over and over and over again, and they don't even let you look at the fucking x-ray? I don't know what bullshit that is. That doesn't make any sense. And then, like, she keeps going and gets, things scheduled, and this thing is growing to the size of a fucking cantaloupe. And they're like, oh yeah, we'll a couple more weeks, we'll get you in here we need a consultation before the surgery. That doesn't make any, no. I still liked the story, and Saturday's one of my favorite authors, and then apparently the thing grows. I mean, it's like they had this weird, dark web kind of thing with Armand, who put spyware on her laptop, and it made it grow, and they're doing this dark web, people pay to watch someone's webcam kind of thing. And then obviously the doctors are in on it. Plus, the company doctor is giving you the most dumb fucking advice I've ever heard in my life. And you're not going to go seek another opinion? That didn't make any sense. There were some forced plot points in here that don't really add up. So you're telling me that the Armand is in on it. The doctor is in on it because they were hiding it. And then, which means that the company is somehow in on it. And then you just said that the things break free and the doctor they put them back in the ocean. This one was a bit of a letdown. I hope y'all enjoyed it. I still mainly enjoyed it, but like I said, there were some forced plot points that just make no sense at all. Armand, the doctor, the company doctor. But, all in all, it was still good. I enjoy Saturday. And I am extremely grateful for all the stories Saturday puts out and, allows it to be narrated. So please check out Saturday's page. We have many more stories from him on the channel, so please check those out as well. I actually should make a playlist at some point. But thank you for listening, everybody, and happy Father's Day to everybody out there, all the fathers out there. This is my first Father's Day, so that's pretty cool. I wasn't sure if I was going to post today, because, Game of Thrones comes out tonight, House of the Dragon Season 3. I'm hyped for that. I'm going to go to work. I'm recording this at 12 in the afternoon of Father's Day. I'm going to go to everybody's houses, meet with everybody. Then I'm going to go to work for a bit and get me a nice big pizza and enjoy it while watching Game of Thrones. Oh, I can't wait. I have 2 hours of the tribal jail story done that we've been working on in the live streams. That's a 4-hour story. I was going to post the whole thing at once, but when stories hit over 2.5 hours, I've noticed that people don't click on them as much, because if it's a 3 hour or longer story, I think a lot of people think they're compilations, and most people don't want to click on compilations. So they see the thumbnail and they see 4 hours, oh, it's a compilation, I'll sit that one out, or I'll click on it later, and it plummets the click-through rate on a video when people are shown a thumbnail and no one clicks it, or they're I'll click on it for bed, 8 hours from now. The click-through rate plummets, and then it just destroys the video's visibility. So this is a 4-hour story that I got, and I want it to do really well, because it's this will be 30 hours of work between recording, highlighting parts, finding voice actors and stuff, and then editing everything. So I might put that out at a 2.5 hour or 2 hour mark. And then they'll be I don't like releasing part 1s and part 2s and part 3s, but this will probably be a part 1, part 2. And then I'll put the whole video out in a video a month after the last, part 2. But look forward to that. I can't wait to get that out for y'all. Awesome story. 8+ voice actors in that one. Can't wait to get it done. And happy Father's Day again, everybody out there. And as always, thanks for listening, everybody.